Hello there, you tinfoil hat-wearing lunatics. Another day, another story makes the inevitable journey from conspiracy theory to cast iron fact. Today, it's the Nord Stream gas pipeline. Guess who really done it? Yeah, the people you thought done it. Hello there, you 6 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage towards truth and freedom that will be reached by diligence and often Pulitzer Prize-winning research. Turn on the notification bell right now and subscribe to our channel so that we can evade the intentions of the algorithm that would have you fed on a diet of mainstream slops. And you know what they'll tell you on the mainstream media? Russia blew up their own pipeline in an act of inconceivable, senseless, unprofitable self-destruction. Certainly wasn't America doing it. There are no clues or evidence to suggest that America did it. Today's story is fantastic. The evolution on the Nord Stream pipeline story is a piece of reporting from a very credible Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who, get ready, is about to be called a conspiracy theorist, a whack job, and condemned for whatever they can find. Is he old? Oh, yeah, he's old. That's bad though, isn't it? Well, is it? Yes, because he said something that's inconvenient. Yeah, old is bad. The bombing of the Nord Stream underwater gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea was a covert operation ordered by the White House, carried out by the CIA, a report by a veteran investigative journalist claims. And we all knew that anyway, because it was bloody obvious. Seymour Hersh, a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, has claimed that US deep-sea divers, using a NATO military exercise as a cover, planted mines along the pipelines that were later detonated remotely, as Jocko Willink said when he was on our show about 3 months ago. Once hailed the greatest American investigative reporter, Hersh, 85, who broke stories such as the mass murder of 500 civilians at My Lai in Vietnam and the torture of prisoners at the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, said that the Black Op was ordered by President Biden and that the attack was carried out by the CIA in cooperation with Norway. Many of us were discussing this possibility just because it seemed plausible, just because it had been explicitly stated that the US had an agenda to take over trade of natural gas between Russia and Europe, that they saw that as a market that they should own, because Joe Biden in public said, well, I tell you, we'll blow up that pipeline. Just because Condoleezza Rice about 20 years ago explicitly said,
you simply want to change the structure of energy dependence. You want to depend more on the North American energy platform, the tremendous bounty of oil and gas that we're finding in North America. You want to have pipelines that don't go through Ukraine and Russia. For years, we've tried to get the Europeans to be interested in different pipeline routes. It's time to do that.
I suppose it wouldn't be a big deal were it not for the fact that the whole thing is framed by a war that we're continually told is humanitarian, when every day new evidence emerges that it is financially motivated, that Zelensky and his government have unusual financial relationships, that Ukraine is corrupt, that it was okay to say Ukraine was corrupt before the start of this war. Peace deals have been suggested and then sabotaged until it's convenient and enough profit's been extracted. It just goes on and on and on until in the end you think, well, what is it we're being told right now that's not true? Because we could start just adjusting a bit more quickly. Here's a few guesses for me. We're going to find out more stuff about the pandemic. They're going to use new ways of introducing lockdowns and digital IDs and surveillance, and they're going to agitate for a war with China. Those are just some of my guesses. Let me know your own conspiracy theorist that will just be normal news in a few months in the comments and chat below. And as for this Seymour Hersh, that conspiracy theorist with his crackpot stories about the mass murder of 500 civilians in My Lai. Oh yeah, the Vietnam War. Of course now we all know that was an ethical, necessary war. That wasn't a mad, giddy proxy war carried out by lunatic, corrupt presidents and unnecessarily draining American lives and resources and wasting the life of the good people of Vietnam. And what about this Abu Ghraib prison? Oh, what a lot of hocus pocus that turned out. It's all well and good complaining about conditions in Abu Ghraib, but may I ask, how are we to reform these Iraqis if we don't attach electrodes to their genitals? So Seymour Hersh, with his crazy stories about Vietnam and Abu Ghraib, is just some sort of nutcase. He should have his own channel on Rumble. Last week, The Times revealed that German investigators remained open to theories that a Western state carried out the bombing with the aim of blaming it on Russia. Do you reckon? Vyacheslav Volodin, the chairman of the Russian State Duma, said, the published facts should become the basis for an international investigation. How weary are you of global politics that you'll just learn this and sort of go, oh, of course. It's almost that you can't summons up enough outrage. That's what we're being invited to do with the pandemic. Oh, you still on about that pandemic where we were all locked down, where people were shamed and blamed and condemned, where pharmaceutical companies made massive profits, even though a couple of years ago loads of pharmaceutical companies have been sued because of the opioid crisis and numerous other scandals. Oh, you're still on about all of that? Yeah, I'm still on about that because the same people are still in charge doing wars that they're claiming are righteous. And get on with this shit. We're being invited to not only be imbecilic, but amnesic. He also said the United States should pay compensation to countries affected by the terrorist attack. It seems outrageous to hear a Russian diplomat say that this is an act of terrorism, but if that balloon flying above the United States is regarded as an infringement, an invasion, an act of terror being used to instigate or at least move along a narrative of agitation and potential conflict between the US and China, legitimizing a state of sanctions with those bloody semiconductors, whatever the hell they are, then you have to consider alternative narratives. In fact, this is one of the things that we're all going to have to be grown up and do. Recognize that there are different perspectives on global affairs than the ones that we're given by the mainstream media. A lot of the time we notice when the mainstream media are manipulating us and directing us with domestic matters, but also with international affairs. They're doing the same thing. To Russia, the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline isn't just a lie, it's also an attack on their economy, on their nation. And then when you fold into that the NATO infringement and the coup in 2014 in Ukraine, you have to look at contemporary events as well. How does what we're learning now about the conflict between Ukraine and Russia affect our understanding of the reporting of conflict and potential ongoing conflict between China and the USA? So bear that in mind when you watch how the balloon is reported on, how the military bases in arc around China are not reported on. Suddenly you'll start hearing about Taiwan being given aid and military aid. We're going to have to learn to hold these facts simultaneously. Hold on a minute. To Russia, that's an act of terrorism. Hold on, that balloon's being exploited. Wait a minute. How did this war start? When did this war start again? What's going to happen between China and the US? Who benefits from this? What are we being told? It's just an ongoing series of questions. Doesn't mean you discount mainstream media narratives or say, oh, Putin's a great guy or Ukrainian people aren't suffering. In fact, the things that you can hold on to as true are the sanctity of human life, the way that we treat one another, the human impact of the war between Russia and Ukraine. These are all things that you have to sort of hold on to amidst the dizzying blur and giddying information that's sometimes contradictory. Asked for comment, Adrienne Watson, a White House spokesperson, said in an email, "This is false and complete fiction." Tammy Thorpe, a spokesperson for the Central Intelligence Agency, similarly wrote, "This claim is completely and utterly false. It's the sort of thing that was probably on Hunter Biden's laptop." You know that when we spoke to Michael Schellenberger, he said that they hold events where they bring journalists in and go, hey, there's going to be all this Russian disinformation stuff. Like they prime the whole journalist community to be ready so that when stuff comes along, like a story about Hunter's laptop or the Nord Stream pipeline, oh yeah, is this one of those things then? The poor little sods, difficult for them to go, wait a minute, are we being lied to? Are we the baddies, Hans?
Are we the baddies?
Look, why don't you show this video to one of your friends who thinks that you're a conspiracy theorist? Let's bring them over. Let's convert them. Let's bring them over to our side. Let's talk them through the case very slowly. Exhibit A of why the Nord Stream pipeline might have been blown up by America. Here's a weirdly subtle little clue. They said they were going to do it.
If Russia invades, there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it. I promise you we'll be able to do it.
What do you think, Holmes? Well, Watson, I suppose if they had, for example, highly trained experts in subaquatic detonation, they could use those. Let's have a look at this crazy doolally Pulitzer Prize winning writer's contributions. The crackpot. Using a NATO military exercise as cover, planted mines along the pipeline that were later detonated remotely. That is interesting, Holmes, but it could still be a conspiracy theory. Let's listen to long-time diplomat under numerous administrations, Victoria Newland. See if she says anything incriminating.
I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
She could have meant, though, that maybe it'll just spontaneously combust. Pipes do spontaneously combust, do they? Can we have that conspiracy theory now? If you want to keep something secret, like international espionage or your own private business, why don't you do what I do and use ExpressVPN? With ExpressVPN, all of my devices become my own private business instead of the playground of the oligarchs and the deep state. Here's a bit more information on that. Without our sponsors and partners, we can't bring you this world-changing, life-altering content. So, today, I want to talk to you about your internet freedom. Social media companies get to decide what content is suitable for you, and they censor whatever they don't like. Who do you think should decide what you read or watch? Social media, big tech giants, or you? Not only do they censor what you read, but they track what you do online. When you're connected to ExpressVPN, your IP address is hidden. My identity is masked and anonymized by a secure VPN server. Plus, ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your data to protect you from hackers and internet bad guys. And all it takes is one easy tap of a button for ExpressVPN to secure all your devices. It's time to take back your privacy at expressvpn.com/brand. If you visit my special link, you'll get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN service for free. Protect your data today. Now, let's get back to our presentation where we show you how centralized authority and mainstream media narratives are keeping you dumb and distracted. Take it away, other me. Let's humour this Pulitzer Prize winner Seymour Hersh with his wacky theories about the fake moon landings and Roswell. Sorry, no, I meant Abu Ghraib and massacre of citizens in Vietnam. Biden's decision to sabotage the pipelines came after more than 9 months of highly secret back and forth debate inside Washington's national security community about how to best achieve that goal. For much of that time, the issue was not whether to do the mission, but how to get it done with no overt clue as to who was responsible. Actually, I'm surprised at how shit they are, like, given how hard they're trying. Right, so what should we say? Russia did it themselves because they're crazy. Look at that balloon, that was Russia. It's China now. I mean China. The divers were Navy only and not members of America's Special Operations Command, whose covert operations must be reported to Congress and briefed in advance to the Senate and House leadership, the so-called Gang of Eight. The Biden administration was doing everything possible to avoid leaks as the planning took place late in 2021 and into the first months of 2022. It's okay, this was a long-planned and necessary mission, and if only they hadn't gone on the news and said they were going to do it. It's like a plot from Scooby-Doo. We would have gotten away with it too if we hadn't gone on the news and said we were going to do it. You pesky kids. President Biden and his foreign policy team, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Secretary of State Tony Blinken, and Victoria Nuland, the Undersecretary of State for Policy, had been vocal and consistent in their hostility to the two pipelines, which ran side by side for 750 miles under the Baltic Sea from two different ports in northeastern Russia near the Estonian border, passing close to the Danish island of Bornholm before ending in northern Germany. The direct route, which bypassed any need to transit Ukraine, had been a boon for the German economy and enjoyed an abundance of cheap Russian natural gas, enough to run its factories and heat its homes, while enabling German distributors to sell excess gas at a profit throughout Western Europe. Action that could be traced to the administration would violate US promises to minimize direct conflict with Russia. Secrecy was essential. Still, that doesn't prove anything. That's just circumstantial evidence so far. From its earliest days, Nord Stream 1 was seen by Washington and its anti-Russian NATO partners as a threat to Western dominance. The holding company behind it, Nord Stream AG, was incorporated in Switzerland in 2005 in partnership with Gazprom, a publicly traded Russian company producing enormous profits for shareholders, which is dominated by oligarchs known to be in the thrall of Putin. Gazprom controlled 51% of the company, with 4 European energy firms, 1 in France, 1 in Netherlands, and 2 in Germany, sharing the remaining 49% of stock and having the right to control downstream sales of the inexpensive natural gas to local distributors in Germany and Western Europe. Gazprom's profits were shared with the Russian government, and state gas and oil revenues were estimated in some years to amount to as much as 45% of Russia's annual budget. Putin is not going to sit there by them old 1980s yellow phones of his. And now for my latest master stroke. You know 45% of our annual budget? Yeah. Where would we be without that, boss? Where we'll be without it is right now, because I'm blowing up that bloody pipeline. Boop, 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 boop. Blow up 45% of their annual budget? Or could it be be? No, it couldn't. America's political fears were real. Putin would now have an additional and much needed major source of income, and Germany and the rest of Western Europe would become addicted to low-cost natural gas supplied by Russia, while diminishing European reliance on America. Oh, he's starting to build a bit of a case now, isn't he? In fact, that's exactly what happened. Many Germans saw Nord Stream 1 as part of the deliverance of former Chancellor Willy Brandt famed Ostpolitik theory, which would enable post-war Germany to rehabilitate itself and other European nations destroyed in World War II by, among other initiatives, utilising cheap Russian gas to fuel a prosperous Western European market and trading economy. And one thing America want, it's a prosperous trading European economy between their arch-enemy Russia and all other European nations. Nord Stream 1 was dangerous enough in the view of NATO and Washington, but Nord Stream 2, whose construction was completed in 2021, would, if approved by German regulators, double the amount of cheap gas that would be available to Germany and Western Europe. It's a bit like the Top Gun movies. The first one was good, but the second one, oh no, this is too good, especially after that long delay. The second pipeline would also provide enough gas for more than 50% of Germany's annual consumption. So not only does it generate revenue for Russia, it also denies revenue to the United States of America, so it's almost doubly impactful. In English football, that would be called a six-pointer. Tensions were constantly escalating between Russia and NATO, backed by the aggressive foreign policy of the Biden administration. Opposition to Nord Stream 2 flared on the eve of the Biden inauguration in January 2021, when Senate Republicans led by Ted Cruz of Texas repeatedly raised the political threat of cheap Russian natural gas during the confirmation hearing of Blinken as Secretary of State. What Hershey is doing is building an incontrovertible pipeline that leads you all the way from one state of affairs to the delivery of the facts. So what you're going to have to do now is blow up this pipeline of facts and then say that he did it himself. A few months later, as the construction of the second pipeline neared completion, Biden blinked. That May, the administration waived sanctions against Nord Stream AG, with a State Department official conceding that trying to stop the pipeline through sanctions and diplomacy had always been a long shot. Behind the scenes, administration officials reportedly urged Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, by then facing a threat of Russian invasion, not to criticise the move. Natural gas prices surged 8% within days, amid growing fears in Germany and Europe that the pipeline suspension and the growing possibility of a war between Russia and Ukraine would lead to a very much unwanted cold winter. And by the way, have you noticed this winter? Brrr, and profits for major energy companies? Oh, what a coincidence. I mean, conspiracy. What do you call them now? Throughout all of this, Russian troops had been steadily and ominously building up on the borders of Ukraine, and by the end of December, more than 100,000 soldiers were in position to strike from Belarus and Crimea. Alarm was growing in Washington, including an assessment from Blinken that the troops' numbers could be doubled in short order. The administration's attention once again was focused on Nord Stream. As long as Europe remained dependent on the pipelines for cheap natural gas, Washington was afraid that countries like Germany would be reluctant to supply Ukraine with the money and weapons it needed to defeat Russia. So the Nord Stream pipeline is not only economically significant for American industry, but it's also strategically important because it represents a tie between Russia and Europe, a trade tie that requires conviviality, congeniality, and friendship. So America had a very strong incentive, strategically, militarily, economically. So when you're establishing motive, you're establishing a hell of a motive. Versus Russia did it, where there's not only not a motive, there's sort of something called not a motive. Like the opposite of a motive. You really have to go some with the idiocy to buy into that stuff, but that's where the mainstream media are directing us. It was at this unsettled moment that Biden authorised Jake Sullivan to bring together an interagency group to come up with a plan. All options were to be on the table, but only one would emerge. Biden and Nuland's indiscretion, which we saw earlier from those clips, if that is what it was, might have frustrated some of the planners, but it also created an opportunity. According to the source, some of the senior officials of the CIA determined that blowing up the pipeline no longer could be considered a covert option because the president just announced that we knew how to do it. This is amazing. You can't say that was covert. We told you we were going to do it. Yeah, but you didn't sort of admit to it, and it is wrong, and it is terrorism, but we told you we was going to do it. The plan to blow up Nord Stream 1 and 2 was suddenly downgraded from a covert operation requiring that Congress be informed to one that was deemed as a highly classified intelligence operation with US military support. So in a way, what they did was they announced it on the television in order that it had to be so secret that they didn't even need congressional support. So that just shows you how government just bypasses its own legislation, even though government is often founded on regulation and legislation that's beneficial to people in positions of power and institutions that are powerful anyway. On the rare occasions where there's some red tape that prevents them from carrying out their giddy schemes, they just find some sly little way of avoiding it. Under the law, the source explained, there was no longer a legal requirement to report the operation to Congress. All they had to do now is just do it, but it still had to be secret. It's like some weird children's club. Blow up the pipeline, don't tell Congress. If you do, you'll catch the flu at 2:30 in the morning. Before we blew up that pipeline, which we didn't blow up, we did Ivagoo Othergov backwards language. My mother says you didn't blow up the North. That's some skipping rhyme. It's all that's required for them to get involved in international espionage without telling their own congressional partners. Asked at a press conference last September about the consequences of the worsening energy crisis in Western Europe, Blinken described the moment as a potentially good one. It's a tremendous opportunity to once and for all remove the dependence on Russian energy and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy as a means of advancing his imperial designs. That's very significant, and that offers tremendous strategic opportunity for the years to come. But meanwhile, we're determined to do everything we possibly can to make sure the consequences of all this are not borne by citizens in our country, or for that matter, around the world. If you wanted to bang a further nail into the coffin of truth, more recently, Victoria Nuland expressed satisfaction at the demise of the newest of the pipelines.
Senator Cruz, like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea.
So there you have it, the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Was it blown up by Russia, who have no reason to do it at all? In fact, it sits at odds with almost every imperial and economic policy they could possibly have. Or could it be America that said they were going to do it out loud in public in Congress and then did it? Allegedly. It's up to you to decide. Let me know in the comments and chat what you think is behind this story. Let me know how, using this analysis, you can look at forthcoming conflicts and the advancing narrative towards them. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. Remember, turn on the notification bell and the subscriptions, because otherwise you won't see our fantastic content that we make 7 days a week just for you. We're also available on Rumble Live. Fantastic fun live show that you will love. Until you join us there, please stay free.